Välkommen allesammans, welcome back to the channel where we use the actual historical sources to speak about Norse paganism, and today we are speaking about Utiseta, sitting outside, the Norse pagan meditation for wisdom, prophecies, and power. Now as usual, there are just a ton of idiots in our community making stuff up about Utiseta, with absolutely no evidence or sources to prove what they're saying, so having your own theories is totally okay about these things, but tell us how you came up with that theory, and any theories that we have to be based on the evidence that we have. We can't just be making things up. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to give you guys the evidence and all the sources about what they say about Utiseta, and then you can decide for yourself how you want to practice. In another video, I'll go into my theories and my own experience with this practice, but in this video, it's just looking at what some of the sources say. So I just want to say before I get into it, please be careful with this practice. It can be very, very intense. I don't want to say it's dangerous, but you definitely want to do it in a safe and comfortable place, and you want to know what you're doing before you go into it, because it can be absolutely haunting. I'm not kidding. We do have records of people losing their minds doing this, so just be very careful, but I'll go into that in other videos. But the sources first, here we go. First, in the Poetic Edda poem, Svipdagsmal, the hero Svipdag sits out on the burial mound in order to gain some spiritual powers. So he sits out on the burial mound where his mother Grua is buried, and he wakes her up from the dead. And she gives him some advice, and she gives him 9 gulder, or magical charms, that will help him in his life. So here he basically sits out to wake up the dead spirit of his mother and learn a few things like that. Get some help. Another example in the Poetic Edda comes from Völuspá, of course, which is probably the most famous example that you know of. And that's where the Völva is said to be sitting out before giving her prophecy to Odin and the children of Heimdall, which is us. So here, Utiseta is used for prophecy purposes. You've all seen the... You've all read the poem Völuspá, I think, so all it is basically a prophecy of the Völva, the prophecy of the witch. That's what it is, directly translated, and that's when she tells about all the things that are going to happen to the world and Ragnarök and all that stuff. So that's a prophecy. Third source we find in the Islendingabok. This is another thing that mentions Utiseta, and this is not really a myth. It's about the settlement of Iceland from medieval times. And in here, there's a very famous story that some of you may have heard of. And this is where the speaker and Gothi of the Althing in Iceland, they didn't have a king in Iceland, but they had kind of a ruler of the Althing, kind of a judge that had powers over the thing. And he was supposed to decide whether Iceland would convert to Christianity or remain pagan. So he sat out for a day and a night under an animal skin blanket, and eventually decided that the country should convert to Christianity to avoid more bloodshed and disaster from Olav Tryggvason, which I've spoken about in another video. That's a crazy story. So here, the Gothi used Utiseta for helping with decisions. So that is 3 mentions. There are quite a bit more in the sagas and Eddas, but it will take too long to go over all of them. But I won't do it now. I'll do it in other videos individually. But they all kind of say similar things. It's used for some different purposes like this, like prophecies, getting magic, waking up the dead, gaining spiritual power, all those kinds of things. So that's what Utiseta was used for. Next, I'm going to go into a law book, actually, that has a mention of this, and that is the Gulating law book from Norway. I'm putting it up here in Norwegian. It's just where I'm reading it from, and I'm trying to translate it quickly here. Basically, it says it makes the practice of Utiseta illegal. You were not allowed to ask about fate, gain power or wisdom, or wake up the dead or those living in mounds. And it mentions hellige steder, like the holy places, meaning mounds and groves and waterfalls. There's also some other texts about Utiseta that it could be done at crossroads that I've seen in other texts. So it seems here, Utiseta was forbidden. It was illegal. The funny thing is with this is that in these Christian medieval law books, they document pagan practices with the goal of making it illegal and making those practices extinct and putting an end to it. But by writing these things down, we have record of it almost 1,000 years later, and we can keep it alive. So that's about it there. It tells us pretty much how to do Utiseta, that we can do it. Mounds especially, mounds is really where it was done mostly, but it seems as here we could also do it in sacred groves or waterfalls, and also at crossroads, as I've read about in other sources as well. So far we have a pretty good description about how to practice Utiseta, this ancient pagan method of meditation from the sagas, from the Eddas and the myths and law codes. We know why it was practiced, and we know where it was practiced, but we don't really know how it was practiced. We're not really given a specific guide of what to do. All we know is that we have to go sit out at nighttime and meditate, and have some different places there. So we have a source from later on in time that can help fill in the blanks here. So as Utiseta became illegal, people didn't stop doing this practice. They just had to change it up a bit. So in the 1200s, simply going outside and sitting at night became illegal. You could not go outside and sit at night. How crazy is that? So after this, the people still did this, except they didn't sit down. They kept moving. And this is how the famous folk magic practice of Aarsgang was born, or the yearly walk. We find it mostly recorded in Sweden, starting in the 1300s and 1400s, and all the way up until the 1900s. Not long ago, people still practiced this tradition, and it was about taking a yearly walk at night in order to gain wisdom and power and prophecies. And we actually have some very detailed records of how to practice this. So Aarsgang is recorded in quite a few different grimoires from Sweden. They call them svarteböcker, or black books, and they give basically a step-by-step guide to how to practice Aarsgang. And here is a list of some of the things they mention. If you're interested, I read a whole page from one of these black books, and I go into a lot more detail about exactly the instruction about how to practice Aarsgang, but these are just some of the ones here. It's very possible that a lot of these things were also done in pagan times with Utiseta, except instead of going for a walk, you would just sit down on the mounds or another sacred place. But exactly how much of these things were originally done in pagan times, and how much of it was created later on with Aarsgang, it's hard to say. We don't know. It would have changed a lot and added a few things over the centuries, but one thing we can probably say for certain is that fasting was involved originally. So we see in some church penance books from medieval times and before that the native pagans would fast for divination purposes. I also did a video about that. I'll put that in the link in the description below as well. So it definitely seemed as though probably fasting for the day would help with divination before you went outside to practice sitting out. Another thing that we can say for pretty good certainty is the time of the year that Utiseta was practiced. So Aarsgang was practiced at the new year of our modern calendar, so it would be the 1st of January. So the new year in the old Norse pagan calendar was right around Halloween time. It would have been the full moon right around Halloween. That's when our new year was, before Christianity came in. So that's probably when Utisitting was probably most likely practiced in pagan times. That's the time of the year. And we do have some records in Scandinavian folk tales and things like that about mysterious things happening around the burial mounds right around the time of Halloween. And that is a pagan belief all over the world, really, that around this time a connection to the dead was stronger, and it was easier to spirit travel between realms like that. But we do definitely have record of Utisitting in the sagas and myths from a lot of various different times, of course. So you can do this anytime you wanted. It's just that probably it was most effective at the full moon and start of the year, right around Halloween time. So that's about it, guys. That's all the things that we know about how to practice the pagan ritual of Utiseta, and that's amazing. This is really the holy grail of evidence that I just went over in this video. We have texts from the Eddas composed in pagan times. We have the sagas giving a description. We have law books from medieval times, and we have a very detailed, documented instructional from the early modern period. This is about the best group of evidence of things that we can hope for in any element of pagan practice. So ideally, we would of course have a written down record of a pagan practice or ritual written down in pagan times by pagans, but we just don't have any of those. All those texts were destroyed and they would have not been allowed to survive, so the next best thing is what we have here. All the sources I went over provides us more than enough information about how to practice the way the pagans would have in ancient times. So I'll go into this a lot more in future videos because this is just the intro. Like I said, there is lots more we can read about and learn about Utiseta from looking at other texts, interpretations, and other theories, and we can also learn from parallels of this practice found in other places, such as like the Hindu meditation out in nature and the Native American vision quests, where they would walk out through the woods by themselves for long periods of time. So I'll go over all of these things, and just be aware that most other things about Utiseta are just theories. The things that we know for 100% sure are here on this list, and any other theories people come up with, they need to agree with the facts that we have about this. Like I said, this is just an intro. I'll go into it a lot more in later videos, and again guys, be careful practicing this. I have to warn, it's quite intense and can cause harm. I will go into my experiences practicing this and give some further cautions and warnings and things and ways to do it right, so you can get the most positive experience out of it. So that's about it for this video. Vi ses nästa gång.